Good afternoon. Today we are going to discuss an important question, mainly the critical minerals in Ukraine and how to make them interesting for investments and not only for the corruption. So nowadays we can see that there is the global competition over the control of critical minerals, and it is important in this case to develop a more sustainable and diverse supply chains. For ants, this topic is one of the most important ones because we can see that Ukraine is moving to the European Union and to NATO, and also we say that it is very important for us that Ukraine would be the part of NATO. The other important thing is integration of Ukraine into the global club of the states, which are developing the high tech projects which are important to resist authoritarian regimes. So today we shall start our research, our discussion from research which we prepared together with the experts to assess the position of Ukraine when it comes to critical minerals, the evaluation of the experts. And today we have the representatives of anti-corruption organization, also our strategic partner, the Anti-Corruption Action Center, who are working on these topics. And today we will discuss the recent article and research, and also we will discuss the security questions, why it is so important for the critical minerals, that the critical minerals will not lead to new oligarchs. And also today we have the representatives of ecological organizations, because their opinion is also important as we are talking about the shift to green energy. And here it is important to know that we have the sustainable environment. So we shall start this meeting with the presentation of our research, and I'm passing the floor to Vasil Tseikhin, the executive director of ANS, and we have the clear ideas on the minerals in Ukraine, and it is important that this research is also available in English. We are going to publish it, and this topic is strategic for us because now all of these organizations are the members of the platform of Permoha. We are advocating weaponry. We are advocating the confiscation of the Russian assets, and it is important why it is so important to help Ukraine to get victory in this war, and how important it is to get back the territories. And at the moment, we know that the enemy is fighting us, but it is important for us to have the access to the critical minerals which are on the temporary occupied territories. So I'm passing the floor to you, Vasily. Thank you, Hannah. Before I start the presentation for our international partners,
Our international partner interpreter will join us in a few minutes, but we'll share the research in English with you as well. Тепер, власне, щодо
coming back to our presentation, we shall start from the basic things, and then we will discuss the policies on the minerals. First of all, we need to use the correct terminology, because in different countries use different approaches, but generally we have critical minerals. The minerals which have an impact on the general sectors of economy, and which has only one or a few suppliers from the other countries. So if the supplier is gone, then it creates big problems for the countries, because the whole sector of the country can be destroyed. And the second one is strategical minerals, and that are the minerals which are required for the defense sector of the country, which is responsible for the weapon manufacturing. So why there is a need to develop for the need for the sustainable development of the mineral base. Just a moment. First of all, that is the basis for the shift to the green energy and energy independence, and that is also one of the priorities of the plan of the restoration of Ukraine, and also that is the part of the Green Deal. As we are moving toward the EU, we are also moving toward these standards, and also the minerals will play the pivotal role in the restoration of the country, and we are talking about the construction materials, and there should be the clear rules on how you can get the permissions. Also, the development of some certain types of materials like lithium, aluminium, vanadium, and the others. So it enhances the security possibilities and capabilities of the national defense industries, and that is also important for us and for our partners who help us with the weapon, and also the development of the production, which will improve the independence of our country on the economical market, and Ukraine can use this opportunity because we have quite big mineral resources, which can be evaluated as $14.8 trillion. 62% is coal, iron ore 14%, and the rest is around 5%. As you can see, we have a lot of coal, and nowadays the coal and oil are not that we are decreasing the number of these resources, but also it is possible to build high-tech mines to build harmonium, and also to use the coal for the other needs. And also on this slide you can see what critical minerals which are considered to be strategic according to the regulations of the European Union can be extracted in Ukraine. In fact, we do not have only natural caoutchouc, or at least we did not identify it, or and also there are 5 more elements which are marked with yellow here. They are classified due to the security reasons. They might be also available, but the information is classified. So what is the situation with the minerals in Ukraine? So the potential of Ukraine on the increasing capacities on extraction and processing and recycling utilization is still possible, but we are facing the issues with investment. Also, we need more transparency and more clear rules. And signing the memorandum in 2021 on strategic partnership on critical minerals and batteries should have been the basis for better cooperation, but so far we do not have big cooperation on this, and the full-scale war had an impact on that as well, because the extraction became more complicated, and also due to the intersectorality of this topic, there are lots of state authorities which are involved to this issue, and they are involved into making the strategic decisions, and of course that makes the negotiations more complicated and the beginning of investment into this sphere. And also on the 23rd of March 2023, the new amendments were made to the legislation, which demands on the regulation of the sector and its digitalization, and also prolongation of the permissions. That are the positive changes, but they do not change the system And when we are talking about deregulation of this sector, we should not forget the interest of Ukraine, because we do not want the investors from the Russian Federation or their partners to enter our market. And also, according to data from the World Bank, up in 2050, we will need up to 3 billion tons of minerals and metals to make a shift to a low carbon decarbonized energy. And in this case, Ukraine has to create the sufficient ecosystem to join the supply chains and to use enough materials which are available in Ukraine as a resource diplomacy and involvement of the strategic investments from the G7 and the other countries which Ukraine is dealing with for diversification import for these countries, and also enhancing the Ukrainian interest, because their investments increase the security of our country. And what conditions do we need for these investments? First of all, that is e-auction for licenses, which is considered to be the most competitive way for the country, but also there might be the other tools, that is the transfer of rights for the resources, and also that is the licenses, and also the agreement on distribution of the products. And what are the advantages of this distribution agreement? That are clear and long-term conditions for the investor, and also that is the possibility to involve the investments also during the wartime, because nowadays it might be dangerous for related with high risks for investors to join this market. And also that is the fast involvement of investments. Otherwise it would take a lot of time, and also risk balancing, which are related to the start of operations in Ukraine. But also there are some disadvantages and risks. First of all, corruptional risks, and also in this case we do not have the competition on the market. The state might not get the sufficient nest and taxes and rent. And also in Ukraine, when signing the agreement on distribution, that is made in the individual ways, so there is no sample, and there is a very big gap during the negotiations. And for investors, that might be also the element which stops them, because they do not know what they will have in the end, and therefore they might be more interested. Those people who are ready for the corruptional schemes might be more ready for investments. The other important aspect is the access to geological information. We have lots of registers and informational bases which are related to this, but unfortunately most of them are in paper, and sometimes there is only one sample of these documents, and sometimes this data is outdated, and therefore investors, foreign investors, they cannot get this information fast, and there is and the quality is low, and there is a very small chance that investors are ready to come with a country with low quality of data is very low as well. Or otherwise we're going to have the mediators who are going to process data and give the data which is not reflected in the official data. So now let's discuss the obstacles which we have now for the investment in Ukrainian mineral extraction sector. First of all, there are hard procedures for the geological data. The next one is individual procedure and conditions when signing the agreement on a distribution of products. And the third one, that is getting the permission for using the land, because you might have the land, you might have the permission, but for example, in the future, you might face this problem with the risk of the environment, or joining the power supply network. As it is a long-term plan, you cannot understand what kind of technologies are you going to use, or what cost you might face in the future. For example, when joining the power supply network, because power supply is monopolized and the prices are high, and also there are the queues to get access to them. And finishing. And also, I would like to tell a bit more about recommendations for ensuring transparency. First of all, that is. We have to define in strategic documents the way how we use the minerals, because so far we have a short list of strategic minerals in the decree of the president, but this process was not inclusive. It is not clear what kind of methodology was used and what are the possible changes in this process. So this decision was made solely by the president, and moreover, it is not understood the strategical projects, which might be also important for the cooperation of Ukraine and the EU according to the regulations of the EU. To compare the critical minerals of the EU and Ukraine, and to work on the supplies, on the manufacturing, and on extraction of these minerals. The next one is the gradual refusal of the current agreement on the distribution of the products. As we have already mentioned, there are advantages and disadvantages, and now the investors might not enter the market without sufficient agreement on distribution, but ideally there should be the competition on the market, and there should be e-auction, and the investors have to fight over the possibility to invest, to extract minerals in Ukraine, and of course there should be the limitation for the investors which are related to the aggressor or the other countries which support them. The next one is the complete digitalization of geological data and simplification of the access. So as I have already mentioned, without access to the real data which you can work with, investors will not enter this market. The fifth one is consolidation of multi-componental integrated permission in a single permission for utilization of the resources. In fact, you cannot make this decision fast, taking into account the architecture of the decision making in Ukraine and the procedures you have to complete before you come to the minerals extraction. But in the countries where the countries like Canada and the other countries and Denmark, it is more clear who the investor has to communicate on the first steps and what authorities will help facilitate investor. So we should move towards the integrated permissions and to give more authorities to the official bodies which are responsible for that, and that would be more beneficial for the investors. And also the implementation of the principles of the sustainable materials, which have to be aligned with the understanding of the European Union on the sustainable extraction and processing and utilization of the materials. The extraction should not create the negative effects for the territories where it is extracted. And the last 2 points, that is enhancement of the territorial gramadas, because at the moment they are expelled from the negotiations on the agreement on distribution, and also they are not involved to perform the additional geological researches to prepare the project for the extraction of the minerals in these areas. But we have, first of all, their direct interest, because that is the investment in their gramada, in their in the work for their citizens, and that will be the additional thing which will attract the investor. And the last one is the developing of the knowledge, skills, and technical potential in sector, and because so far the government does not have some certain strategy on how to prepare the specialists in this industry, and In fact, when these industries go into develop, that will be also the positive signal for the investors. So, because when they will enter this market, they will have the sufficient knowledge and researches to extract minerals effectively. And also, you can find more information on our website. It is available in English and Ukrainian language. Thank you, Vasil. And even this presentation, as the coalition of organization has the objective to develop the national policy on
for so after 32 years, we saw who were our oligarchs: Firtash, Kolomoisky, Akhmetov, and we can see the results. And therefore, it is utmost important for us for the Center of counter-operating of the corruption. And now we have titanium in Ukraine, and today we are going to see how it works. Good afternoon. Now we just made the investigation on who has the permissions for these special resources. Yeah, so we have published it on Liga website. And the first part about the titanium. And I have made a short review of their methodology, but I was told that we do not have enough time, and therefore I will tell briefly that we take the list of RNBO as of 2021, where we have the metallic ores and metallic minerals, which have the strategic significance, and I have compared it to the data I have received from geological data, and I checked the permission. Here we have 37 minerals, and that is also titanium. Titanium used for the jets, for the bombs of lithium and graphite ores, uranium ores. So that is what is important not only for Ukraine. If you consider it by sectors, we can say that we have most permissions for germanium, then we have the iron, or 16 titanium, then we have gold, tantal, molybden, and the others strategic minerals. If we consider it by the owner, then we can say that the biggest number is owned of permissions is owned by the state. A bit less belongs to Rinat Akhmetov. A bit less, but they are the most interesting. That are the companies related
Геннадія Вудкевича.
With Gennady Vutkevich. But here we have some nuances as well, because when we're talking about the permission controlled by the state, that is done only on the paper. One of the investigations we were mentioning before, we saw there was the story, and there was Zhytomyr company. They own 16 permissions for titanium ores, and when we checked it, we saw that 90% is controlled by the state Держнадра Ukraine, but the other 10% is belongs to the person who is 3 times arrested, and his wife said that he doesn't own any kind of business. And recently, one very respectful company, in one of the respectful companies, we found the documents. So I wouldn't say that all the state-controlled permissions are controlled by the state, but all of the permissions we are talking about that are the visible permission, they were issued sometimes very long time ago, maybe even 10 years ago, or even more. So that's what was happening before that. And coming back to the company I mentioned, when we were preparing the materials on this company, the resources from the extracting business, they advised us not to describe this story because we might face the problems. One more interesting thing related to the special permissions is that the companies which are owned, the private companies, so they have the real beneficiaries, so the real people like Rinat Akhmetov, but nevertheless we can see that the shares of these companies are registered on the company with offshore jurisdictions, and therefore we are not able to answer who is the owner of these companies. We only can see those beneficiaries which are mentioned in the registers. Also, we can see the cases when there is an owner in the registers, but that is a foreigner. The person who we can Google and we can see that that is a manager of extraction projects, but this person is not the investor. And then we have the question, who actually owns this company? Or among the beneficiaries, we can find the people who we can't find anyone. So we have the strategic permissions, so for example, for the iron ore. And the owners of these companies, we can see there is a person from Cyprus, and this person is not mentioned anywhere else. Who is controlling these permissions? And also, I have forgotten to say why we started to speak about the golden permissions, and we found there the relation to the Russian Federation, even though the legislation says that the Russian Federation shouldn't be in our mineral extraction. So please check our article. And also we can see 16 permissions on the temporary occupied territory that are mainly gold, rare minerals, and if I'm not mistaken, also iron ore. And something else, let me check because I have made a note for myself. So gold, iron ore, rare minerals, and also manganese. And also a few dozens of the permission that is close to the temporary occupied territories, and also the part of the minerals we can see that are the frozen owners. So those who work on this sphere, they are working, but also they have the challenges. When we started to consider this market, we actually saw that the owners of the extracting companies, they are facing the following problem. That is lack of the minerals in the ores they got the permission for. So we have seen one of the golden permissions. The company said that they have invested 200 millions, but nevertheless they couldn't find the gold they received the permission for. And also we can see the problem of the resources, lack of resources, and also lack of communication with the investors, unresolved issues with the state, and therefore the company is not able to resell their permissions. And also, in case when we're talking about sanctions, they are able to stop, and also the debts of the companies, and also the protest from Rabadas and the protest from the environmental organizations. And also we can see that the courts can be also the obstacles, and the law enforcement bodies. So I can see when we have lots of cases when the company left the territory of permission, started to work there. And when you check the documents, you cannot actually understand how it happened. Where did the law enforcement get these materials? And also we have the resources of many very potential resources, which we are planning to use through the auction. So we're talking about vanadium, calcium, salts, and if we were able to involve investment in this case, they could have become the elements of our security. Thank you very much. Thank you. So now I would like to pass the floor to the executive director of CPK, and Daria. You are traveling a lot, and we are advocating weapon, and we do understand how important it is for strategy for the Russians not to own these minerals. And what about now? What are the priorities, taking into account the investigations which are ongoing, which show that we need transparency and also strategic approach? So first of all, Ukraine has to write their own book, its own book of victory. And we have to understand how much weapon do we need and what kind of weapon. And then we have to understand where do we get resources for it. Because every weapon requires minerals, because Alina was mentioning the part of these strategic minerals, which is being extracted in Ukraine and can be extracted in the future in Ukraine. We are talking about the war with a very serious enemy, which will not disappear in 1 day or 2 days or in 10 years. Unfortunately, we are doomed to share the map of the world with the Russian Federation. And also, we cannot expect them to lose their interest to destroy Ukraine and Ukrainian nation. And nevertheless, what is happening there, whether the Putin will stay on the throne or not, whether the country will collapse or not. Nevertheless, the Russian Federation will always try to destroy Ukraine. But the current flow of the weapon to Ukraine in the framework of the technical assistance to Ukraine will finish 1 day, and Ukraine has to take into account the situation. We have to build our defense strategy, and the defense strategy has to take into account A, what can we produce inside in Ukraine, and B, how can we be useful for our strategic partners, for our strategic security partners, in the context of providing them the critical materials for defense equipment and offense equipment. Alina has mentioned about her publication, Generals of Titanium Ores, and you can find it on Liga website. But I also would like to draw attention to a few aspects. Both American and European market was and still depends on the Russian titanium, and we, during the decades, we were sending the titanium to the Russian titanium organization, mainly Avisma. And Boeing had the issues when Avisma was sanctioned. And the leader on the market of the jets and planes, where can they get these critical resources when the main producer of these materials is the People's Republic of China and also the countries which are not Ukraine friendly? So Boeing has to change their supply chains. But then we had Airbus. Airbus is constructing the civilian planes, but still they need titanium, and the main titanium supplier was the Russian Federation. And we had the issues on how should we use sanctions against Avisma and how we can substitute the supply chains. Ukraine is able, in my opinion, to become the substitution in this chain. But we need to improve inside the system how we distribute these critical resources, how we issue the permissions, and how we support our state companies, because there were lots of attempts to involve the investors, especially in the companies like ZTMK, Zaporizhzhia Titanium Magnum company. But nevertheless, it failed. So we have to have the detailed analysis of the mistakes, and I'm sure that the war on the territory of Ukraine, that is important reason, but not the main one. The reason for the investors not coming to Ukraine, and of course the rapid interest of the militaries, which are so that is a big question for Ukrainian investment climate. And also a very important thing, we have to remind the world that the Russian Federation when occupying our territories, they are not only occupying our people and turning them into their soldiers or destroying them. The Russian Federation is also occupying our mineral resources, and they are increasing the territories where they can extract critical minerals. And of course, it is easier to use them, and they are closer to the Republic of Turkey and the European Union. If we have to remind the world that you want the Russian Federation to control the titanium in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, and what will happen to those mines which are in the territory of Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Donetsk oblasts. We did not even talk about gas yet, so we are just planning to work on gas situation, but that is also critical. So lots of minerals are on the east of the country. And the final accord, the critical resources, the strategic minerals, they have to be the part of the strategy Ukraine on renovation, on the construction of new Ukraine, and it has to be the part of our defensive strategy. The oligarchs should not be there, and if we will allow what has happened 10 years, dozen years ago, then we'll have corruption again, which we have to destroy now, and it costs us a lot. So thank you, Daria. Let's talk about geopolitics now. Mr. Mikhailo, you as the director of the Center of Globalistics, the Strategy 21, you are considering the geopolitical competition of the critical rare minerals, which are mainly in the Republic of China, and they have the strong positions on the extraction and the dominating position. And recently, there were the limitations for the US, for Switzerland, and for the others. So they understand that we are on the way to NATO and the EU, and also when it comes to the critical minerals, and the RCP is not a friend to us, because we do understand that China was trying to enter the Motor Sich and the other companies. We have memorandum on the strategic cooperation with the minerals, and how Ukraine can explain why it is important, why our geopolitical integration has to happen also in the sphere of the mineral extraction. And the second question, which concerns me a lot when we look at what is happening around it, what was happening before, Alina has just mentioned the schemes, lack of transparency, and the rest. And that means that when during genocide we have made the nationalization of a few companies. Do we need to nationalize the mines, the strategic minerals mines, taking account that these mines are given to the people close to the government, or they will get the permissions and they are going to resell it later, or maybe till the moment we will create our own policy on this, we can limit it. We have to write that there should be only those strategic partners for Ukraine on our way to the EU and NATO. So that is not the Russian Federation. That is, we are talking about the global fight of democracy against autocracy, and autocracy is already in China. They are already extracting there. They have the military bases in Djibouti. So here, the significance of Ukraine on this map is increasing. So thank you, Ms. Hanna. First of all, thank you for the detailed analysis, which we heard from Mr. Vasil. Yes, actually, you've mentioned how we can explain the European Union the importance of the situation in Ukraine. I guess it already happened, but I would like to remind that the first steps for these for coming closer in geological means. In August 2012 in Brussels, there was a meeting with the representatives of the European Commission, and we have the scientists who are with the scientists from Ukraine, and we have already mentioned that that is a 2-year memorandum for the studies on how the European Union and Ukraine can cooperate on the critical minerals. And therefore, taking into account the European bureaucracy, I think that that is going to be a long process, and I do not want it to be endless. And here we have an interesting thing. We have to understand how geopolitical configuration which we have an impact on us. With our resource base on strategic minerals. So maybe you have paid attention to the fact that the dialogue is the European Union and Central Asia. Why Central Asia? Because Central Asia has a central position on the continent, which is called Eurasia, when it comes to the real and potential resources, not only carbons. So traditionally, everyone knows that Kazakhstan is oil, big oil, Turkmenistan is gas, but nevertheless, it's a fact, but not a well-known fact. Kazakhstan, as the biggest country in Central Asia, it has a huge resource of everything which we call critical resources. Ms. Daria has actually mentioned titanium and how the Russian Federation works. When they took over the sources of titanium, and then having the cycle of titanium equipment, of titanium foams and different titanium products. So in fact, they started to dominate of the Russian titanium, even though it is the Ukrainian materials are used for that, for the European Union and for the US. And I need to say that it's not something new. If we talk about uranium, we have the same situation, but with Kazakhstan. In fact, the biggest resources of uranium and the producer of uranium concentrate is Kazakhstan. But on the international market, for the USA and for some European countries, the supplier of the nuclear power or uranium concentrates is the Russian Federation, which is in fact operating the resources of Kazakhstan. Therefore, we have the catharsis time, the time of liquidation of these schemes, and in this case, the interest of the European Union to Central Asia is in reformatting the relations with Central Asian countries and to get the access to these resources, their resources. I'm not very optimistic about the European Union and their success here. I think they will fail. Why? Because Kazakhstan is squeezed between China and the Russian Federation. Japan is far away. Japan does not have the direct access to Kazakhstan. And also taking into account the specifics of the European bureaucracy, being slow, long procedures, and so on, and taking into account the peculiarities of the authoritarian and totalitarian regimes, I think that the European Union can fail. But when we talk about Ukraine, we are here, we are close to the European Union, we're the candidate to be the part of the to the membership in the European Union, and the supply chains are easier and shorter, and therefore I think that there is more interest for the European Union. But what is important for us? It is important for us not to everything could to be limited with upstream. They after extracting, they made the enriching of these materials and said, I do not think that it's our interest. We have to involve strategic investments for the production. So I will just give a few examples, and we also have to have strategic partnerships. So, for example, if we take uranium, in this case, we have to continue the partnership with the US, because the US has the well-developed structure and history, and we were the first country which switched to the alternative nuclear power supply, Austin Gauss. And here we have a long history of cooperation, successful cooperation. We have to develop it. And then when it comes to titanium, by the way, speaking of titanium, now it's the attempt to restart, but we have to do that in order for these two strategic sectors, uranium and titanium, directions to be the priorities for the cooperation with the US. And if we consider the other directions, and here we have diversified approach. For example, a lot of people are talking about the perspectives of the lithium mines, not only in Ukraine, but also in the context of our European context. But here I would like to think of Japan, because lithium is a uranium-containing material, and therefore it can create the basis for the production of the battery storages. Starting from the simple batteries and up to energy storages with big capacities, which are more and more demanded with the development of the green energy. And Japan, in this case, is leading the industry. And by the way, some time ago, but unfortunately it was not successful, in 2000s, there was an attempt to create this kind of company, and also there was an interest from Germany. In 2005, I remember when I was the expert of the high level on the economical partnership between Ukraine and Germany, and we had a meeting in Berlin when one of the German entrepreneurs who already had an experience of working in Ukraine, and I have asked what was he doing, and he said that he is interested in uranium and rare minerals. But speaking of the rare minerals, at that moment he could not get any information, and what he has noticed is that were the problems related with the transparency and also some corruption schemes. So we do not start everything from the scratch. That is quite a long period, and this period is just an opportunity to restart everything. And here I would agree with the fact that now it's a good opportunity. There is a good opportunity to do that. So, what did Germany do in gas sector when they saw how the Russian Federation is into the gas sector, and how they control directly or indirectly these sectors? So they have just took the control over the companies controlled by Gazprom. So we should not be afraid to do the next steps, to have a carte blanche and to start from the scratch the relations with our strategic partners without the investments which are so much needed for us. In 2014, our center has finished the project with the European Commission on the development of the project of the National Development Fund. If you remember, we were talking about the big projects of the European companies in the development of the gas extraction in the east, in the Black Sea. And the big companies entered the Ukraine, ExxonMobil, Shell, Chevron. And the idea was that when we are extracting something from our soil and we get something out of it, we should not just waste this money through the budget and through the taxes. We should think about the future generations. And we have to create the fund. Taking as an example the Norwegian model and the gas projects or our agrarian resources and agrarian export, or when we are talking about the mineral resources. So that are the things we have to think over, and we have to reanimate those projects and to develop it further. Thank you, Mikhail. If after we became independent and we created the fund with the Norwegian model for the citizens, I think in this case we wouldn't have been famous with oligarch viewers and for example so therefore we have to look for the options, we have to look for the ways how the critical minerals have to serve people, and that is a question of the national security. We went to Taiwan and we have seen in Taiwan, especially in Taiwan, on how all the companies on the semiconductors are based. And therefore, the US said that if China will invade Taiwan, they will protect Taiwan. So that is the reason why it didn't happen to Ukraine. When they said that they are not, that is why they didn't start to protect Ukraine as much as they want. Of course, we should not be just the mineral source or the buffer zone. We have to understand that the question of our minerals is also the question of the entire cycle of that additional money. And I would like to pass the floor to Dmytro Oshchenkov on how we touched the environmental sector, because we do not have our ground burned and we do not want to destroy the unique sources for centuries. Dmytro Skrylenkov is famous as an author of these long list of different conventions. What is your opinion of as the director of the Bureau of and the person who is into different structures of different conventions? The floor is yours. Thank you. I will try to be very brief because every mineral resource can be discussed for a very long time and its impact on the environment. But in general, the extraction of the minerals we are talking about and any minerals are related to the impact on the environment. And unfortunately, Ukrainian experience leads us to the issue that the question of the environmental question is something which is not paid attention to, because typically when we are talking about the minerals we are talking about, that are the minerals which need lots of efforts to be extracted. So we have to invest it, or we have to sacrifice something. So typically you mentioned the oligarchs. For oligarchs it was always easier to have an agreement with the locals and with the government and to do the externalization of the costs. So someone was taking the high income, and the Hromadas had the environmental issues, the polluted air, water, and soil, and so on and so forth. And therefore, before the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation in Ukraine, we have conducted the survey with our colleagues on the attacks on eco-activists. We can say that there are the journalists, eco organizations, and the most significant, the biggest attacks were when we were talking about those who were protecting minerals. So they were killing people, torturing people, and burning the cars, the vehicles. So this fear is always on the cross of the personal and state interests, and therefore the environment issues have to be taken into account on every level. Unfortunately, I was participating the legislation development and also the Euro integrational intentions of Ukraine, and actually among the biggest lobbyists of these laws not to be adopted were the lobbyists from the minerals usage. And also we have in the parliament we have the deputies who were voting against the good reforms, who were creating the obstacles only because they were saying that's even not the question of the environmental problems, that is a question of the transparency, because it is also related with the participation of the society, and many people do not like when it comes to investment. Many people do not like the investments. So therefore, the procedure is ruined, and therefore it is very important. And the legislation on penalties for the wrong usage of the minerals is blocked, and now we have the competition of two state sectors, which are the main barrier, and therefore in this sphere it is very important to take into account the interests of gramadas and environmental issues. And when we are talking about the investors and investments, in this case, it's not that much important where will investor come from, because I'm talking about the Russian Federation now, because even the companies with good reputation in the world, very often they work with the approach, we work as our legislation allows us to do that. If in the legislation we will have no transparent rules for everyone and the procedures, in this case, no matter what kind of investor is going to come here, this investor will use this gap in legislation to get more income, and that will lead to the fact that some costs, some recultivation and the other things would be left for gramadas, and many gramadas suffer from that. And we already talked about the distribution, and we said everything was very positive, but when we're talking about the minerals, we have to know the history of the company and to know the reputation of the company when it enters the market. The mechanism is started operating recently, but transfer of the rights, it can be also the problem, because we cannot know who these minerals will belong to, and we will have no impact on that, and therefore we also have some risks here, and that has already changed the paradigm of the minerals extraction in Ukraine, because due to lack of control, we have lots of these issues. So main of my thesis is that to redistribute, and by the way, I agree with Ms. Hanna that so far we should not rush to give the permissions for all mines during the war, because it's always cheap and not always transparent procedures. We have to form the clear rules for sustainable play of all of the players in the market, for gramadas to be also to have the benefits from this cooperation, and the benefits should last for long time, because we have lots of objects for mineral extractions from the Soviet times. We are still paying our health for. Yes, Dmitry, when we are talking about gramadas, because first of all, on the territory of gramadas, they have these mines and they will live there. So it shouldn't be in this way that the corruptioners get the income, and then all the ecological consequences will be will be taken by Hromadas. And also when we are talking about the important strategic sectors, for example, the military sector for Ukraine, which actually needs these resources, and there are lots of lists. And here we have when some deputies are leaving their positions, and we hope for the better future. One of our participants is aligned, that is Torsten Walland from EU delegation. He was asking the question in English.
Use it or lose it, be introduced to prevent sleeping deposits and speculation with them. Which role sustainability certification should play to ensure a full integration into EU and global higher value chains? Otherwise, existing trends of Ukraine being an exporter of cheap raw materials may be reinforced, and may legally binding international arbitration play a role in cleaning up the raw material sector. Це, Дмитре, до вас, особливо по міжнародному арбітражу, як воно може...
So how can we use it or not? So we have two more speakers, which I would like to give the floor to. And I can see that we have a very narrow topical discussion. Victoria Wojcicka, the representative of the Center of Victory. Sure. So as Hannah has asked, I will try to be brief. A very interesting discussion, a very good discussion, and I would like to continue the topic which was raised by Mr. Mikhailo, to add a bit of geopolitics to explain why it is important for Ukraine to talk about the issues related to strategical minerals. In our center, we have made a small research which says actually why it is important, why Ukrainian victory is important for our partners. To be able to be capable to meet the challenges related to the implementation of those ambitious plans and the relevant visions on Green Deal, on Biden's plans, and also everything that is related to the post-industrial economy development. I would like to give you a few numbers just for understanding what is the context we have now and our partners are facing. So as of now, we have the situation when China has a key role. So they are the biggest player in rare mineral extraction. So they extract 85-90% of general extraction in the world. Lithium is around 60%, 65% of nickel. And just for us to understand, 75% of accumulators for the vehicles is also produced in China. So our partners developed democracy. They allowed it to happen, and that is a threat. The threat from the point of view because due to some geopolitical processes, we might face the problems with these products to implement those ambitious plans which are mentioned by the European Union and by the US. And therefore, we think that Ukraine and resources which we have in Ukraine, also of titanium, lithium, and the other rare minerals, which we have mentioned today during this meeting, they make the victory of Ukraine important not only from the point of view of the security on the European continent, but also our fast victory will allow us to diversify the dependence of the developed countries to China, to dependence from China and dependence from the Russian Federation, and to implement the decoupling plans thanks to Ukraine. But at the same time, I would like to comment the Torsten's question, and I would like to finish with some comments, taking account that we have an experience of work in the committee which are working on the energy sector, and we have met at that time with Mr. Mikhailo and with other colleagues. We were looking for the better ways for the ways out with these frozen permissions, and also we have some similar thing with the minimum. The frozen licenses is the possibility for someone to earn money on arbitrage, getting the needed licenses and not to invest anything or to invest very small resources to be able to resell it on a very high price on the strategic investor. I think that we, on this stage, during the war, we have to, maybe thanks to our international partners, we have to do the inventorization of all frozen licenses and actually all the licenses which are related to the strategic minerals, and make the decision that the frozen licenses, they have to be returned to the government to be later sold to the investor on the transparent conditions. We also have to understand that our security is based on two main pillars. The first one is military, is army, and the second one the enhancing of the economical partnership. And I would consider that as criteria for involving investors for the investments in the strategic sector from the partners. We should not say that we need to expel the Russian Federation or Iran. We need another approach. I would build it in the other way, and we have to ask our partners who have the same position, who are trying to bring the end of this war faster. They can participate these programs to develop some certain sectors in Ukraine in the future, to extract and to enrich our mineral. The third aspect I would like to draw attention for, and I think that it would be the end of my speech, we have to revise and to form the strategy on the critical and strategical minerals for this strategy to be based on our own needs. And the example is very simple. So we want and we plan to be integrated in the European Union, and that means that we will have our own needs for some certain materials to implement these plans. Mr. Mikhailo has given us a very good example of energy storage, which will become one of the key directions for the sustainable development of our energy sector. And therefore, we have to understand that the part of these minerals has to be directed to the processing, so that we could have the final product, energy storage, which would be built in Ukraine from Ukrainian materials. And we have to take into account the optimal energy mix, and we have to do this homework to understand what would be our optimal energy mix and what do we need to develop the development of this sector in the future. And here we have a very good example of Germany, where there were the researchers, by the way, using the artificial intelligence, and now it defines what is the optimal energy mix for the country for the next 10, 15, and 20 years. So, of course, we have to make the inventorization of all our critical and strategical minerals, and we have to make it open. Of course, we have to develop the concept and implement it right now on the frozen licenses, we have to bring them back to the state, and we have to decide what shall we do with them. And of course, the transparency on the involvement of engagement of investors through ORP, which has to be the transparent too, but it has to be unified. As soon as we have discretion towards some discreditation, discrimination towards some investor, that is also the way to the corruption. We have to remove it, and we have to have more standard solutions. Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. I do understand that there is a lot of work in the future. How can we find the balance for the balance between money and the expert of the network eons? So more than 40 days, we can see the hot water, and we have hydrological draw, but the water is still in Dnipro. The water is in the caps, in our toilets, in our melioration system. The companies have the water to continue work. It's not thanks to the water storage. It's thanks to Police region. We still have this now, which is not regulated that much as Dnipro. The nature lives by its own rules, and it doesn't care why are we raping it for the sand and amber, or for the natural resources, for the minerals. It doesn't care whether we do that for our victory or to be richer. I also want to win, to celebrate the victory, but also I want to live not in a draw, but in a blooming country. And therefore, speaking on the Skrilnikov law, we have to adopt the law on the Amber network. I would like to add that we also need to at least put in our legislation the definition of the harm to the nature. You would be surprised, but there is no definition for this action. We cannot evaluate it, and we cannot prove it in the courts, because we do not have this term in our legislation. Our committee in the parliament, ecological committee in the parliament, they just do nothing. They are just talking. Our colleagues, Dmytro Skrilnikov and the others, we are working on the legislation mentioning ecocide. So we have the legislation, but no punishment, and also the law 0391. So there are hearing, and then we have strange amendment. There is no law, and there is no sufficient ecological control. We are talking a lot about ecological insurance, which will make all these companies Dmytro has mentioned, those of them who are leaving the garbage, the waste, but still nothing works. So nothing will work out without good judges. So we need the reform of the court, and also when we're talking about the beryllium extraction under the protected natural area, has to be prohibited, but nevertheless, it is planned to have the processing company on the Ubrt River, and the river is going to be polluted. And I think that the harm would be very significant. And why you have heard that from Dmytro. Thank you, Oleg, and therefore our network, ICUV and CPK, the Center of Globalistics, Strategy 21, ecology, law and people. We have our own coalition. When from the one side we have the approval of the we do the environmental impact assessment, and also we have the Emerald network, which is very important, and how the Moors saved Ukrainians from the invasion, and we do understand how precious they are. And we are the people who read Raymond Everson, the founder of Transcendentalism, and we do understand that we want for the upcoming generations not to leave the draw, but also take in account that one of the parts of the genocide of the Russian Federation is ecocide, and here and now we're evaluating the damages, and that is one of the 10 forms of Zelensky's peace formula. That is a competition for eco-genocide. If we consider how many parks are occupied, how many fields are mined, so dear friends, we have lots of things to do, and ecocide has to be compensated as well. And now Japan is ahead of G7, and I think that would be a good opportunity because we have already mentioned Japan, and for us as a country, this country is a high technological country. We have Shinkansen train Kyiv-Simferopol, and that is going to be the train with solar technologies, which would be brought to Ukraine. The train will take 4 hours from Kyiv to Simferopol, so we have to work to cooperate only with our partners, real partners, not with China and the RF, and we have to make people hear Hromadas and the rest. So we will continue in more details on these questions, on sleeping licenses and the rest. Dear investigator, thank you very much, because they are the ones who do not allow the robbers to steal the future from our children. Thank you.